Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sunday's edition of Weekend Waypoints, production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy. I'm going to take you through Saturday's action around SEC baseball and get you ready for Sunday's finales in the conference. Before we get into that, though, I have to remind you that this episode of Weekend Waypoints and every episode of Weekend Waypoints is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, which is your new home for Jordan brand. Gear up today and take flight. Make your play in the latest head-to-toe Jordan gear for the entire family, available in-store and at academy.com. Unleash your greatness with Jordan, now at Academy. All right, folks. First of all, my apologies if you can hear it. I've got a bit of a squeaky chair situation in this hotel room, so if I, shift my weight too much, it'll make a lot of squeaking noises. So apologies if that comes through on the broadcast a little bit. We'll try to sit as still as possible, but that's kind of hard for me because I'm a fidgety guy. So that's life. Different day in the SEC yesterday, a busy day, but whereas Friday gave us a lot of drama and late night finishes, things like that, Saturday was not that. A lot of relatively routine wins, but still some exciting stuff, some interesting stuff. So let's jump in and talk about the game of the day here. Let me share my screen. There it is. Okay. It is Texas 3, Texas A&M 2. Another close game in this rivalry series, this highly anticipated series. Another game in which Texas A&M made a late push in the ninth inning to score a tying run and couldn't quite get it done. Dylan Volantis shuts the door again, and another close game for Texas. They've been so good in these kind of games, these close games that are decided by one play here or there. Games that come down to can they get the outs, in the bullpen in the big moments. And the answer so far this season has been yes in basically every scenario. So they do it again and clinch that series against the Aggies. You see A&M there with a run in the first and a run in the ninth, and then nothing there in between. Interesting on the Texas side as we scroll down to the pitchers here. They got good stuff from Thomas Burns and Luke Harrison, of course. But in Thomas Burns in the bullpen, they tried to get it done without using Grubbs or Volantis, but they ended up having to go to both of them in the bullpen. Now, 6 and 8 pitches respectively. Obviously, that's not a heavy load for those guys. So we probably could see them today again if needed. Texas certainly going to hope to not have that be the case, but going to be willing to do that. They're going to have to use some bullpen today, though, because Jason Flores is starting. And not that Jason Flores can't be effective, because obviously he can. He has been all season, but he's not as stretched out as a starter would normally be. So the chances are they're going to have to use a pretty decent amount of bullpen today. And so we'll see. But certainly you'll take the series win and move on for Texas. Today, the sweep obviously would be gravy, and the way that Texas is playing right now, it's just like, who's to say they won't, right? It'll probably be one run, and it'll probably be Volantis on the mound to close it out, and that's just kind of how that's been the formula of late. So big win there for the Longhorns. And on the A&M side, the Aggies are probably disappointed that they haven't swung the bats a little bit better, but I think there's a lot of positives here. You've pitched it pretty well. The park, Mark Etheridge, who's been on site in Austin the last couple of days, and he wrote about it, so go read it on the website if you haven't. He mentioned it's played very pitcher friendly. The ballpark has. That's part of it, but A&M has pitched well, and okay, the offense hasn't produced maybe as much as you would like, but they've been right there with the number one team in the country back-to-back days. And I know there's no moral victories in the SEC. That's not really how this works, but if you were wondering if Texas would come in here and expose A&M in some way as, they just got hot, or this what they've been doing isn't real, I think now we can see that's not the case. They played Texas basically one play away from winning both games, and they just happened to have gone the other way. And that's because Texas has been really good in games like this. So if you're an Aggie, I'd feel pretty good about this, even if you would have preferred, obviously, to get a win to this point. And salvaging today, I think, will be big for A&M if they can get that done. So still an opportunity this weekend to have a positive experience. So, all right, I'm going to close out of this. My face is about to get really big on the screen. I'm going to take a sip of water. Then I'm going to flip over to comments because I see we have some waiting. So here we go. All right. Let's see. Joey's the first one in here. Hi, Joey. A public apology to Marcus Phillips for doubting you, bro. Great stuff. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff for Marcus Phillips. He's on our list of pitcher of the day candidates we'll get to shortly. And yeah, that's the thing. And I was a little bit guilty of this too, Joey. Like, he's been pitching great. Like, it was just the stolen bases thing that was biting him a little bit. But in terms of like recording outs, like, he was pretty effective. It was just kind of the extra bases from players running on him. But the actual pitching part was always pretty good. And so when you have a game in which he doesn't allow the base running to happen, and some of that is just the way LSU plays, if so some of that's just the way LSU plays, and so therefore even if Marcus Phillips hadn't done anything differently, maybe there wouldn't have been any base stealing. But also, I have to imagine that there was some sort of strategy behind holding runners, and Tennessee coaching staff and Frank Anderson, and aren't dumb. So I'm sure they've been working with him on some things to make it at least a little bit better. But yeah, great performance there from the right-hander. Tanner Harris says a lot of big rubber games today. Going to be a great day of baseball. And then WPS Woo Pig Suey agreed. Yeah, good rubber games today. Arkansas, Florida. You've got LSU, Tennessee. You've got Kentucky, South Carolina. And I'm going to stop naming them because I'm going to forget somebody, and then somebody gets upset because I'm doing this off the top of the dome. But should be a lot of fun today to see how those series go. Sean Miller says, how slow are the LSU players? 0 stolen bases against Marcus Phillips. They're going to be well suited for the 40-plus-year-old slow pitch softball in a couple of decades. Yeah, I mean, I think it's less, and I know you're saying that in jest, Sean, so it's important that you realize I tell you that, I'm not taking what you said there super seriously, but it's less that they're slow and more that it's just not part of their game. They just, look at their stat sheet, and, they've got some guys that have 7 or 8 stolen bases, but they're not very efficient stealing. You look back historically at Jay Johnson's teams, that's not really how they operate. They, and it worked with, when you had lineups with Dylan Cruz and Tommy White, et cetera, like, you could just kind of wait around for those guys to come up and hit a ball in the gap or hit a ball out of the ballpark. And this weekend has called for, maybe a little something different, and LSU hasn't been able to take advantage. So now, of course, they did win the one game. They're in a rubber match today, so it hasn't crushed them. But yeah, I would have thought that even though it isn't really their game, I would have thought they would have had a little something going. So I'm with you there. Eric Simmons says, if Texas A&M beats Texas today, are they in the hosting discussion? I think they are. I think it's a little soon for that. I mean, if they salvage a game today, I'm looking at it now, 9-12 in the SEC. So you're still a little ways away from that. You got 9 games left at that point. They would have to win 7 of them, 6 of them at least. So like, it's probably asking a little bit much there, but they're playing like a host team. Like, if they end up on the 2 line, that's that's obviously a 2 seat that nobody wants to see. If you're like a ACC host team, that's not, or TCU, if TCU ends up hosting and wins the Big 12, A&M is not a team you're going to want to see show up in your bracket. That is for sure. Jeremy Scott says, Roll Tide got the sweep. Yeah, sweeping Missouri, big win on Saturday, 12-1. Didn't let Mizzou even have an ounce of hope that they could win that one. So that was, and then that's what you're looking for with Mizzou, is you just get the sweep and you move on. Mizzou, unfortunately for them, falls to 0-21 in SEC play. The opportunities to score a win for Missouri are getting fewer and fewer, and it came close in the series. That the Friday game was there for the taking, and the Thursday game was there for the taking, and they just couldn't get it done. Josh Woolley says, nice bounce back for the Hogs. Agreed. Yeah, it was a 7-0 win against Florida. Really good job on the mound. You said, Gage Wood looked awesome, hitting 98 over and over. Yeah, the stuff looked really good for Gage Wood. Great bullpen stuff. Gabe Gackle, Aiden Jimenez. That was kind of what the doctor ordered for Arkansas. They did a nice job offensively. They never really let Florida get anything going on the offensive side for them. That was kind of exactly what the Razorbacks needed. Carl Dunn says LSU couldn't get past Phillips and bullpen went south on the Tigers. Key game for LSU today. Hats off to Tennessee and their pitching and hitting. Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the thing with the whole running thing is like, if Phillips is pitching really well and you just don't have runners on base, like it does obviously, goes without saying, makes it a little bit tougher. Longhorn Pundit just sends along some broom emojis. Looking for a sweep there. My 0000007 says, "Are you going to talk about all games or just A&M and UT?" Yeah, we'll talk about all of them as you've heard the last few minutes. We're bouncing around the league based on the comments here, and the ones that don't get commented on, we'll talk about it in a little bit. Tanner Harris says Gage Wood fastball up to 99. Yeah, I mean that's what you're looking for for sure. Eric Simmons says, I think almost half of the SEC teams could possibly host regionals. What do you think? I mean, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. And there'll certainly be that many in the mix. Now, whether or not the math works out for that, we'll have to see. But certainly, roughly half the league will be in the mix to host, at least as we go into the last weekend of the regular season, the SEC tournament, all that stuff. Sean says a big part of the low scoring in the A&M Texas series, incredibly inconsistent strike zone. Both teams have to be very frustrated. Yeah, that'll do it. I mean, if you don't know what the strike zone is, then yeah, you're timid at the plate. You're maybe too aggressive because you're just protecting against I don't know what a strike is, or on the flip side, just kind of being more passive because you don't know what you need to swing at or don't. So yeah, you're just in your head as a hitter, I think is part of it too. You're not so much thinking about what you need to do to get a hit off this pitcher. You're thinking more about what is the strike zone going to be or things like that. And that's obviously not the headspace you want to be in. The guy with all the zeros, the A&M, Texas, and LSU UT fatigue is real. I mean, I get that, but those are the two big series of the weekend, right? I mean, that's just kind of the way it goes. Yeah. James Gillum says, Joe, can I make a trade and swap playing LSU last series of the year to playing Mizzou? Yeah, that would be helpful. And that's a topic we Mark and I have talked a decent bit about, is just that how will let's say Missouri goes 0-30 or even 1-29, whatever. How does the view all of the fact that 10 teams got sweeps against Mizzou, and then the rest of the league didn't play Mizzou, and then how do you because this is an outlier, right? There are always teams in the league that are not good. Like every year, there's going to be at least one team, usually multiple, that just aren't very good, and that's normal. But having a team that has been this non-competitive largely is totally an outlier. So it's just something that the committee's never had to deal with. So we'll see. We've talked about it. I want to be optimistic that the committee will do a good job of understanding and taking into account intra-conference strength of schedule, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that, because admittedly it is, they're not just looking at the SEC. They've got all these conferences to deal with. And so, but hopefully it will be taken into some account there. All right. Let's see here. Is that complete games by Adams? Not even mention it. We'll get there. There's a lot of show left. We still got a hitter of the week segment, a pitcher of the week segment. We got lots of show left. Kev says not SEC related, but how are you enjoying your first weekend in Eugene, Joe? No, it's great. Like it's been a lot of fun. Like it's also, the weather has been nice. Like, yes, okay, that it is kind of gray sometimes here, but man, the temperature's in the 60s. But not that kind of, it's not all that windy. So like the 60s doesn't feel like the 40s if the wind is blowing hard, like it's just been really pleasant. Good baseball too. Oregon's good, man. Like, and so is Oregon State. They're just having a bad weekend, but I don't know if Oregon's going to have the RPI to host, but that's another team that is a 2 seed. You don't, like, if you're UC Irvine and you host, like, Oregon is not a team you want to see in your regional. Like, that's just not a good matchup, not a fun matchup, certainly. Walker Yaw says Nate Harris for Kentucky looks good for a freshman. Yeah, I mean that's a good shout out. Kentucky might have something there. Now South Carolina's offense we know is not necessarily like the best measuring stick there, but that's impressive. And I've liked what I've seen from him this season at times when they've had him on the mound, and so maybe he's like a little bit of Ben Cleaver 2.0, where like in this regard. Now Cleaver was hurt last year, so we didn't see as much of him as we would have otherwise, but maybe he's a little bit similar in terms of like we see some signs this year, but then next year is really his year to break out, or maybe he's breaking out now. Like they definitely are asking more of him now. They stretched him out. Originally when they moved him in the rotation, he was kind of a 3-4 inning guy, but went 7, I believe, and we'll talk about it here shortly because I have him on my list. But yeah, that's huge because now you've got a situation where McKay didn't pitch great in game 2 of that doubleheader yesterday, but he's been solid. And then Cleaver's been great. And now if Nate Harris is, not even as good as he was yesterday, but just good in general, I think Kentucky's really, really got something, not just in him, but in a pretty solid rotation. I mean, okay, they don't have a Liam Doyle or a Kyson Witherspoon or choose your ace, but they do have, really solid kind of 1, 2, 3 that's going to give them a chance to compete well in a regional once they get there. Todd Harris, speaking of the Cats, he says, my Cats had a chance to win the series in the second game of the DH, but once again, lose another 1-run game. Cats need to take the series today with Cleaver on the mound and keep their momentum going. I agree. Got to get this series. I mean, you're not obviously, and this, Todd, like obviously if they lose a series, they're not in bad shape, but yeah, this is a team you're better than. It's at home. Like you just got to get this series. And it was disappointing for Kentucky that they weren't able to, there was another 1-run loss, but this is just a game that, look, if you're a regional team, you win this game. And I think Kentucky's a regional team. Then they should win this game. A quick note, so I don't forget here, Ethan Petrie went down with an injury yesterday for South Carolina. He did not play in the second game. I've not seen anything this morning necessarily about his status, but it was seen with his arm in a sling at some point late in that game in the dugout. So obviously not great if we were going straight to the sling, but we'll see. But obviously if he's out, like the South Carolina lineup goes from one that you feel like you can navigate to one you really feel like you can pitch to. Now that said, they did beat Kentucky without Ethan Petrie in the second game of that doubleheader, so they still managed to get it done, but that's obviously a huge loss. Yeah, this is the thing. Like Sean says, we're on Mizzou history watch at 0-21. Georgia hasn't been good on the road. Can they steal a game? A&M in College Station, Hail State and Columbia. Where do they have the best chance to pick up a win? And maybe Georgia. Well, yeah, Georgia and Columbia maybe, just because maybe you have a game where I think about Georgia's game yesterday where they scored 6 runs and they had 4 homers. So it's just like a lot of solo home runs. So if they have a game where some of those home runs are flyouts, and the ballpark in Columbia can play big, especially if the wind's blowing in. And so like, do they have a game where they just have a bunch of flyouts, right? And a game where they can't find the plate. I think they walked 9 Oklahoma batters yesterday. And so if they have a game where they walk a bunch of dudes, the ball's not flying, like I could see that. So if you made me pick, I'd probably go that direction. I'm tempted to say they would also have a chance against Mississippi State at home, but I don't know. State might need that series, so I think there's might be a little bit of motivation there for State to pick up some wins there for its postseason resume. We'll see. Eric asked, I think Georgia will host a regional if they finish above 500 in SEC play. What do you think? I would agree, Eric. I think that's definitely there. Same thing you asked about Ole Miss. Same thing with Ole Miss. I think they're in that discussion. Eric Simmons also says Georgia's going to need home field advantage in the NCAA tournament because they can't win on the road. Yeah, I mean, they're a team that definitely needs that home field edge. Not that they can't win on the road if it happens. Like they're talented, obviously, but yeah, they're a team that definitely plays a lot better home. They really like a top 8, and their RPI is good. So like they're on track to be a top 8. But if they can play at home 2 weekends, you like their chances. Although I say that, and NC State went down to Athens and won a super last year, so we'll have to see. But yeah, that would certainly help. Mark McCullough says, "Can State come back from the dead?" They can. Gotta win the rubber match today. I think that's step one. But let me scroll over to where I can actually see the records here. Yeah, 7-13. You do still have the Mizzou series, Mark. So like that's something, you don't want to have to bank on that, but at least you're pretty confident you're going to get at least 2 wins there, and you should get 3. I think it's doable. You just got a lot of work to do, and you're just about out of rope, I would say. Maybe, if you lose today, maybe you still have a little bit of, you're not quite at the end of the rope, but it's getting close. And I think your question is right on in terms of understand. I think the fan base understands that like the rope you're getting towards the end of it. James Gillum says, I don't expect to see Petrie anymore this year. Woof. Yeah. I mean, if that's a shame, because that's obviously a huge loss. He's the guy to line up centers on, like maybe more so than any other single player in the SEC. He is kind of the center of that everything there for South Carolina. Sean Miller says, host today, in my opinion, Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, LSU, Auburn, Ole Miss, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, Bama, all in the discussion. Yeah, I'd say that's right. Not all of those probably will, but yeah, those are all in the discussion as of today for sure. All right, scrolling. Caleb, yes, thank you for the reminder, Caleb. That was an early game yesterday. It feels like it happened several days ago, but yeah, Rylan Zaborowski got hurt in Georgia's win against Oklahoma to clinch that series. And it was a weird one too. He was making a relay throw. And it first looked fine. It was like a relay throw to the plate from an outfielder, and he looked fine. But then like after a few seconds, like he kind of called for the trainer and they came out, and it almost looked like, and I'm not saying this is what's happening, but it almost, the way he was holding his arm, I can't really show because my arm's too low, but he was holding his arm at like a 90-degree angle like this and was kind of playing with his hand. It almost reminded me of when a pitcher comes off the mound and he talks about the tingling in his arm, and oftentimes with the pitcher, that's a precursor to Tommy John. Now, I am not in any way saying I am not a trainer. I am not a doctor. I was not there, but it is just, you don't say that with a position player. That's the only reason I bring it up. It's just like, for a pitcher, it's like, that's, kind of scary. And, oftentimes what we hear is, it was forearm tightness or just felt a little bit of, didn't feel quite right. And then like a couple weeks later, we hear that, okay, he's shut down. Again, I'm not saying that's the case here. And perhaps he can still DH even if there is some concern there, right? Still probably could swing a bat. So we'll see. But obviously, if he's out for any period of time, that's a big hit for Georgia. Todd Harris says, so can the 5 SEC teams that don't play Mizzou add 1.5 wins to the SEC total since everyone also gets a sweep versus them? So yeah, that'd be Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, Auburn, and Vanderbilt. Yeah, I mean, who says no to that proposal for sure? All right, let's get to hitter of the day and then pitcher of the day, and then we'll get you guys out of here. Here is the hitters list here. Let's see if I can fit it on. Yeah, there we go. Scott Mudler for Oklahoma in that loss against Georgia, 2 for 4, 2 doubles, 3 runs batted in. Good to see him back. He's battled injuries this year, but has done a nice job of late. The hitter of the day was Colby Branch in that same game, 3 for 3 with 2 home runs. Big home runs there for Georgia. They needed felt like every last run there because, as we expected with Oklahoma, like they just don't go away. Oklahoma's probably as hard-nosed and as tenacious as any team in the conference. They're in every game. They were down 9-2 in the first game of this year, the second game of this series, and ended up only losing 10-9. I think it's a great example of typically how they kind of fight their way through it. But Georgia gets it done there in large part thanks to Colby Branch. Other names in this list, a few guys from Alabama in that 12-1 win over Mizzou. Frankly, I could have had a couple more Crimson Tide players. But we got Will Hodo 2 for 4 with a couple homers. Bryce Fowler 2 for 3 with a homer and a walk. Cade Snell 3 for 4. Big games all around there. In game 1 for Kentucky, the win over South Carolina, Carson Hansen 2 for 4 with a home run. In game 2, the loss for Kentucky, Cole Hage 2 for 4 with a double and a home run. We'll skip down to Henry Kazmar. You go a little bit further down. That was in the game. I forgot to label it, but that was in the game 2 victory for South Carolina, 3 for 5. with a double. Ethan Mendoza for Texas, such a catalyst in their lineup, a guy who's really taken a step forward for them. 3 for 4 with a double and a home run for Ethan Mendoza. Terrence Keel II on the A&M side, 2 for 4 with 2 doubles. Ryan Moorman for Ole Miss. That was in a 7-1 win over Vanderbilt. Ole Miss wins that series and has done so pretty convincingly. I think the 15-4 is the aggregate total between the first 2 games there. Ryan Moorman, 2 for 3 with a homer, got hit by a pitch, 3 runs batted in. Auburn in the loss to Mississippi State, led by Chase Fralick, 2 for 3 with a homer and a walk, and then a handful of guys for Mississippi State. Garrick Fry, Sawyer Reeves, Bryce Chance, all with 3 hits, including a double. Yesterday, Garrick Fry had 2 doubles. In the LSU-Tennessee matchup, Stephen Milam, 2 for 4 with a double and a home run. That's a sight for sore eyes for LSU to have a game like that for Milam. And then Tennessee, it was a 9-3 win for Tennessee over LSU to fight back. Good fight for Tennessee after losing in heartbreaking fashion in game 1 to come back and grab game 2 to force a decider today. That's huge. Gavin Keelan, 3 for 6. Cannon Peebles, 2 for 3. Drove in 5 runs, did Cannon Peebles. And then we'll flip over to pitchers here. Malachi Witherspoon didn't get help from his defense there. 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, just 1 earned run, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. Leighton Finley on the other side, really solid game there for him as well. Zane Adams for Alabama, complete game against Mizzou, 7 innings. Since it was 12-1, it was a 7-inning game. Really good to see him have that kind of outing. It's been a little up and down for him this season. Same with Riley Quick. A really good outing yesterday for Zane Adams. Nate Harris, we talked about him. There's the stats there. 2 runs over 7 innings, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. In game 2, Niall Adcock helped keep Kentucky in that game. 3 shutout innings in relief there. Arkansas in that win over Florida. Gage Wood, Gabe Gackle, Aiden Jimenez combined to give up 5 hits and 4 walks with 10 strikeouts in 9 shutout innings. On the Texas A&M side, Luke Harris and Justin Lampkin, both really strong starts for their team. Pitcher of the day, was Riley Maddox in Ole Miss's win against Vanderbilt. 7 innings pitched, gave up just 1 run, didn't walk anybody, 5 strikeouts. That's not really – Riley Maddox has been solid at times this year, but not really a guy you expect, even against a Vanderbilt lineup that's a little bit light sometimes. Not a guy you expect to go out there and give up 1 run over 7 innings. It's just not really been his game, not really been something we've seen from him. But he goes out and does it and at a really big time for Ole Miss. For South Carolina, in game 2 of that doubleheader against Kentucky, Ashton Crowther, speaking of guys, we haven't really seen him on this list at all. Not really been a guy for South Carolina, but came up big yesterday with 2 2/3 hitless shutout innings for the Gamecocks. Evan Sierre, solid start there, 6 innings, 3 runs allowed in the win over Auburn. And then Marcus Phillips and Anthony Ianson, both good outings in that game between Tennessee and LSU. All right, quickly, game of the day on Sunday. A lot of good choices. We talked about all the different rubber games. I'm going to go Arkansas and Florida, though, because I kind of want to see what Florida has left on the mound. If Arkansas just comes out and blitzes them. I think that's on the table, but we'll see. It's TBA for Florida on the mound. Not a surprise there, given that they're kind of patching it together behind Peterson and Aiden King. Landon Beidelshe's on the mound for Arkansas. Should be a fun matchup there, but rubber games everywhere you look in the SEC, so there should be a lot of really fun games there on the schedule today. Let me do a quick scroll. Ethan Spencer says, if Ole Miss sweeps Vandy, are they looking at a national seed? Well, their record would be 13-8 in the league. They'd be tracking that way. Obviously they'd have to finish strong, but yeah, they'd probably be tracking that way. And I'll leave that to Kendall Aaron and Mark Etheridge on the Nerdcast in the middle of the week when they put together the field of 64, because I am not involved in that. So, I can't say, but they would certainly, I think, be tracking that direction. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this edition of Weekend Waypoints, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Academy Sports and Outdoors, for sponsoring this and every episode of Weekend Waypoints. And I will be back with you all Friday morning to preview another weekend of SEC baseball. I will talk to you then. Enjoy the baseball today, everybody.